Hey, hi, I'm Yashwant. Welcome to the Yashwant Palagar Show. The theme of our today's episode is foreign education, or you can call it as higher education too. So, for today's episode, we have a guest with us. He is Nikhil, the founder of Foreign Admits. Hi, Nikhil. Good to have you here. How are you doing?
Hi, great to be on the show, and I believe your audience is amazing. So yeah, feels good.
Yeah, it's good to have you here. So, I just introduced you as a founder of Foreign Admits. Can you introduce more about yourself to our audience?
Sure.
Yeah.
Hi guys, this is Nikhil. Nikhil Jain from Foreign Admits. I'm born, brought up in Calcutta. Came from a middle class background. Did IIT BHU in 2011 to 2016 as a mining engineer. Then went on to pursue my PhD from IIT Bombay on Monash University. It's a joint PhD. And in the pre-final year, I took a leap of faith, understanding the basic issues in the higher education system, the fundamental flaws, and started Foreign Admits in 2018 and joined the company, though formally as a full-time employee in 2020. And it's been a long experience where we have served more than 20,000 students all across India. And yeah, and the journey begins or starts with the same motive to make an informed career choice and to enable the masses of India or even the globe to make an informed career choice when they are going to pursue their education.
Yeah, it was really inspiring, Nikhil. So, what actually Foreign Admits do?
So when we look at study abroad, the whole market is fragmented, and we started foreign admits with this simple motive of first-hand experience sharing to the students who are going to take a career step like going for their masters abroad or bachelors abroad. What we have observed is in India, a couple of things that people do once in a lifetime, like buying their house, buying a car, or studying abroad. Okay, they don't do it more frequently. So it's a very big investment for them, emotionally, financially, mentally, and all. But all of these investments usually doesn't end up with a better productive returns because they have been disguised as lack of clarity or they don't trusted information on the internet because of information asymmetry. And the entire higher education process is very complex, and people need to have a depth understanding of the place or the country or the college or the university and the career prospects to be able to go there and to study. So what essentially we did was connecting relevant people who are actually been there, who have gone through the journey, learning from the people who have actually done the same things which you wanted to do and are successful in their lives. So that's where we started as a mentorship platform. It's a highly automated, digital, and personalized platform where you can connect to the relevant mentors who would match into your journey needs and get a more first-hand, fresh perspective. And then we started a 360-degree kind of a product where you get an end-to-end guidance. We become a journey partner for you, starting from helping you discover your relevant career choices using data, using personalized experiences, guidance, and all. And then we help you narrow down your choices to certain career aspects, certain job profiles, or certain aspirations that one needs to fulfill. And people have very, I would say, limited kind of aspirations. Either they want to go abroad for a bigger career change, or they want to go for an immigration purpose, they want to settle there and never look back, or else they want to get a branded college experience which they never had in their lives, or they want to pursue quality education but they have very limited budgets and they have to have a flexible education system. So fulfilling these aspirations in India is very, I would say, difficult, seeing the education curriculum that we have. But your universities all across the world, especially and few parts in US and Canada, have that ability. So when we look towards mentorship, then student goes with the application process, the scholarship search. The bigger problem is how do I know which university gives me what scholarship? Based on that, I can tailor my applications. So our
Yeah.
platform is highly automated, digitized, and there is a big role that AI plays in getting that personalized career choices solved. But
Yeah.
then AI alone cannot solve the entire problem, and that's where we connect the students with our 500 plus mentor network, admission officers, professors from different universities, so that they can get a first-hand experience. And then once they secure an admission with our guidance, then that finding a relevant loan partner, visa partner, or a forex partner or accommodation. Planning these small things make sense because they helps in the long term value. Getting a right loan is a very critical option, because it kind of hits on your financial planning a lot. Then
Okay.
if you're going to stay for the bachelor students, accommodations are really important because they are first time out of their country, for away from their parents, getting a safe and accommodation in budget cost is really important. And then services are very personalized. If you're looking for UK for a particular board gives you that kind of personalized information about those university around that location, around the needs of you, so that you don't have to open Google or any kind of hundreds of tabs. You get everything under one roof and as what you needed. So that way it's a very connected platform. And then we have a community where students get to interact with like-minded other people, co-partner with them while they're traveling, and all sorts of those things. So it's a highly, I would say, automated, personalized, authentic guidance platform. But at the same time, it's made affordable to million students' aspirational needs, because we understand if you talk about quality, cost comes as a big hindrance. The way we have tweaked our business model, we have considerably reduced the cost compared to the current market players who are really good, but they are very costly to afford by the middle class Indian bikes, because we represent that typical Indian middle class. So that's why it's a highly modularized. If someone needs only mentorship, they can pick up mentorship. Someone needs only scholarship, they can pick up scholarship. They don't need to get everything. Even if they get everything, the price points is very affordable for
Okay.
any Indian students to do it. Because of technology and automation, we are able to do it.
It is good to hear. So, like before deciding whether to go for, I mean, foreign education or not, so that decision plays an important role. Like what to choose and where to choose is secondary. So, how to decide whether we can go for foreign education or not? I mean, what is that factor?
Absolutely. I think this is a very interesting question and one of
Yeah.
the most important questions that I always speak to my students, that why do you want to go abroad? What's the purpose for you? And the aspiration has usually been the purpose. It's not always that you get a quality education, you go and study abroad. There are quality education options in India also. The ROI might be up and down, that's fine, but then the cost is also phenomenally low compared to abroad education. So what we understand from the student is what is their aspirational needs and why they believe their aspirational needs is going to get fulfilled if they're going abroad. Do they know about the experience of going abroad or not? What is the whole experience going to look like? Because it might be a lonely journey, it might be a lot of personal maintenance that they need to do, or personal control over it. They might need to live on their own. They would get mature, but then that maturity comes at a cost, right? Part of the education, the change, it would not be as theoretical as here we have. It might be more engaging, more practical, more rigorous also. Are they ready to take up that goals and challenges? And if basically suffice their needs, then yes, then studying abroad makes sense. Some people they don't have even, let's say, couple of lakhs also for studying. You might need to pay for your expenses, upfront, because then the scholarship may come a little late up and down, and you can't be totally deniable. So are you having that loan criteria, loan understanding also or not? So those things that ideally students miss out, and that particular thing we first educate the student, then we ask for the decision making. Because educating a student is the first thing. Because if they are going abroad, the typical difference before us and after us that we make in the student's life is conviction. If they have gone through our first initial round of counseling, then they are having more conviction of going abroad or staying in India. Not every student that we recommend to go abroad. Few students who have budget issues or family issues or particular responsibility issues, we always recommend them, hey, you sort your problems out. You can study in India if you need. There are good options in public and private domain. You can plan for that education and you can still excel in your career. It's not about a foreign degree is going to make a big difference to everyone's life. Yes, to many people life it will make a difference, but then are you ready for that difference also? That is also one other question. And not everyone's going to afford it, because I came from a typical Indian low middle class background where studying abroad was not even imaginable, because studying was not even imaginable for my case. So when I look back that way, you still can do it. It's not impossible even if you come from a low middle class or a low class background. You just have to work hard enough. And that time frame, do you have that time frame to be able to work hard enough or not? Are you able to afford that time frame? If you're not able to afford it, do not dream of something which is not right now feasible. Okay. So then it would be like a miscalculation of the entire, I would say, career planning, and it really jeopardize and put students on a much bigger financial or societal pressure. And that's something also we don't want when the kids go abroad.
Yeah, that's good to hear. So what are all the different ways? So like if an individual decides to go out and study abroad, so what are the different ways to get a foreign university admission? What are the
Sure.
different exams available, kind of things?
I understand. So if a person is going in the bachelor's life cycle, like after 12th and going for their bachelor's BSc,
Okay.
BBA, BS, BMS, there are different kinds of bachelor's courses. Then ideally they need to give an English test. Okay. If they don't come from an IB school, like
Okay.
1% or less than 1% of the Indian students study at IB school. Rest other comes from a normal school background like me. So then you have to give an English proficiency test, which is like TOEFL, a well-recognized proficiency test, or IELTS by British Council. So these two, or PTE is also there. Nowadays, Duolingo is also opened up. But ideally, students give TOEFL or IELTS because they have
Okay.
more validation than PTE or Duolingo, because few countries still are not able to recognize these tests. So
Okay.
TOEFL or IELTS is the one test that you always need to give. Then the secondary test comes under the aptitude domain, which is SAT. You
Okay.
can give an SAT, and then subject wise SATs are also there depending on the kind of subject that you want to pursue. So SAT is ideally needed in US, where they also consider aptitude test. In other countries they recommend SAT, but it is not mandatory. If the profile is good, without SAT also you can get an admission. So in bachelor's the minimum one test is SAT, TOEFL or IELTS, or else add-on test for US is SAT or ACT also, which is an alternative to SAT. Now when person from college, let's say BTech student or BBA student planning for their masters or MBA or PhD on that note, then also they need to give one test, which is an English proficiency test, which is TOEFL or IELTS. In very very few cases some universities may give a letter of their English proficiency, and in some countries, in some colleges, you may not have to give IELTS or TOEFL. Like in UK, many universities do accept if your previous educational background has been in English. You may not need to give IELTS or TOEFL, but the top-notch ones always gonna you have to give it because the competition is that way. So IELTS or TOEFL or else you need to give one. The other exam that you might need to give is again based on the aptitude, which is GRE or GMAT. So GRE stands for Graduate Record Examination. GMAT stands for Graduate Management Aptitude I think test. So GRE or GMAT are the two tests that you need to give. If you're going for MBA or management courses, people prefer GMAT. If you're going for technical courses, people prefer GRE. However, in management now, you can even give GRE and go there because it is widely acceptable all over the world, even in MBA also or MIM. So GRE is one of the tests that you would need to give, and it has quantitative and verbal section. One is more
Okay.
towards the mathematics, logical reasoning, and aptitude. One is more towards the reading comprehension and writing skills. So these are the two sections. Ideally, if you have to layman terms, you have to qualify. It's maths area and English area. These are the two
Okay.
areas that you need to work upon. And then TOEFL and IELTS are basically reading, speaking, listening, and writing. So these
Okay.
are the four parameters on which you are being tested in TOEFL and IELTS. So these are the two tests. The GRE and GMAT are ideally needed for US
Mm.
and for MBA, because in MBA aptitude tests are usually given mandated, but in
Okay.
some of the again B schools in UK you may not need GMAT or GRE, but it is recommended to try and get that. So these are the basic tests that someone needs when they're planning for their bachelor's or master's or MBA. And the ideal time frame for GRE, GMAT, or SAT is 2 to 6 months. If someone is really, really poor in their aptitude or English, they have never been. So 2 to 6 months is the
Okay.
aggressive to a passive timeline. If someone is planning for TOEFL, ideally 1 to 2 months is the usual timeline. 1 to 3 months you may take. 1 month is the average timeline that people take. 3 months is for people who are taking time, maybe from Hindi medium or maybe from a regional board. They never had an English medium, so that way you might take a little bit of time.
Okay, that's cool. So apart from these exams, so what prerequisites are generally needed in order to be eligible for a foreign admission?
So in higher education, when we're looking at bachelor's, your transcripts,
Okay.
your test scores, sometimes a letter of recommendation from the teacher, your essays are going to be really important. In many universities, they ask for essay. So, many universities don't even ask for essay. And then your English proficiency test or your SAT scores. These are the primary documents that you would need, and a resume. And resume consists of all your academic and scholastic or extracurricular achievements. These are the few things that you would need for your bachelor's. And then the round progresses. Some university may conduct an interview also for scholarship and admission. For that also you might need to be prepared. So for bachelor's, just listing down few documents: your school basically board transcript, your predicted scores. If you haven't gotten your scores, you might get a predicted score list, or your class 11th mark sheets if you haven't gotten the 12th yet. Then your test scores like IELTS, TOEFL, SAT, ACT. Then you might need a letter of recommendation from your teachers or your internship mentors. And then your this thing statement of purpose or the essay for a
Okay.
particular university, that why do you want to apply, what made you apply, all of those things that you would be answering them. That would ensure scholarships also. For masters or MBA or MIM or PhD, you have a little bit of a different requirements. You would need your mark sheets, you would need a transcript ideally. Okay, if you're applying in 7th sem, some of you may not have a transcript ready. Then all the previous mark sheet combined together, you would need that. The secondary thing that you would need is your resume. The third thing that you would need is couple of letters of minimum 2 letters of recommendations from your professors with whom you have worked with, or your supervisors or your mentors, internship mentors or internship supervisor, or from your bosses from the job where you are doing. Okay, so 2 letters of recommendation. And in technical domain, basically in masters of science, you would need one SOP, which is statement of purpose, which is ideally one document which justifies who you are, why you want to study, why this university, why this course, what next, and why your candidature is strong enough. That is something you will be answering. In MBA, however, you have multiple essays. They might want to judge you on your personal, professional, social backgrounds. So there might be 3 to 7 essays also, and then some video interviews also. So they want to judge you on the overall thing. And so yeah, apart from these limited documents like SOP, LOR, resume, transcript, test scores, and your IELTS, TOEFL scores, you would need essays and interview prep. And all of these documents ideally takes 1 to 1.5 months to get everything properly in place for all the universities that you want to apply.
Okay. That's a whole lot of information. So how important it is to find the right mentor when opting for foreign education?
I think it is very critical and a little subjective. Someone who has a very good clarity of what they want to do and why they want to do, they
Yeah.
may not need a mentor to some extent.
Okay.
But I feel everyone needs a mentor in whatever the process, because this entire higher education planning to admission process is of 1 year.
Yes.
So there are stages which we don't know. Even getting 2 admissions and then comparing between universities where we should go. Some universities offering X scholarship, some is offering Y scholarship. How do I plan my career? So there you need mentorship. Choosing a right set of university, you would need a mentorship. Choosing a right set of career in a right kind of a country, you would need mentorship. Yeah. Choosing about a particular scholarship, how does one approach towards the scholarship? There are reputed scholarships like Erasmus Mundus, Reliance Dhirubhai Ambani, Tata Scholarship, KC Mahindra, Knight NSS. So many scholarships are, and you have never applied them. So what is the
Yes.
psyche of the admission committee? How they evaluate? What is the aspirational value they look at? So there are so many nitty gritty things which you get from someone who's actually done that. So mentorship is very critical, and it helps you do few things: reduce the number of mistakes, which ideally you are going to do it for sure because of their experience. Fasten the process which you would be taking time for 6 weeks, 8 weeks, and you might do it in a couple of days only, because now you know things which you never knew, which you were ideally going to explore. And then enrich the quality of applications, the quality of your work, the quality of your research with their own experiences, so that you do a quality application, saving time with reduced error, the high chances of success. And then you go with a better conviction to a particular country. You take up a right loan lender. That itself is a very big thing. Do you take a non-collateral loan or a collateral loan, or a cosigner loan or a non-cosigner loan? A lot of us, we don't know the value of each other. And when we spend some time, we still may not know, because the internet is filled with more SEO based or asymmetric information. We don't
Yes.
know what information to be trusted. And that's where the personalized first hand experience makes a lot of sense. And that's where I find mentorship is really critical. If you nail down, if you want to nail down on your applications, you want to get in a good university with full conviction.
Yep, that's good. So most of the people in general, and most of the people I came across, choose country and college first, then they choose which course to do. Like, what is the best way, according to you, to choose between MS or MBA or other PG courses? I mean, this is specific for people who completed UG. Yeah.
I understand. And those kind of people have a different aspiration.
Okay.
Their aspiration is to get into that country and do something and settle there and probably get a job and spend more and more time there.
Okay.
They are not worried more about what kind of course they want to go ahead. Ideally, that's not a very, I would say, appropriate way to approach a problem, because in that case you might struggle with job problems,
Yeah.
because you never knew what you needed. You just wanted to get into that particular pack. And that's where people often find driving Uber, or I'm not saying driving
Yeah.
an Uber is a bad thing,
Yeah.
but then that was not the purpose you wanted to go. You are a mechanical engineer going for masters in mechanical engineering or something, and then in the end you're driving an Uber. You're not making use of your engineering. You might have taken a driving lesson and been a better driver that way. Okay, so those are the few things that you essentially have to first nail down. What kind of course would make sense for you? Once you understand the course, then you would be able to justify which country and which university would make sense. That way you would never face a problem with getting a good job, because you know what course you are doing, and that is the essential element. You're not studying for the sake of studying, because ideally in that case which you mentioned, when people choose a country and a university and then figure out the course, their ideal intent is to get the visa, the study visa. Here the option is different. The meritorious students who get successful in their career, they first pick a course, then they pick a college or set of colleges which are going to fulfill them with the course needs. They understand what they are going to get in that course, and then they look towards the visa criteria of those universities country, and then they understand where the jobs are, where the companies are where I want to work at, and based on that they select and finalize a bunch of countries, not just one country ideally. Okay, that way people are open. People, when they restrict themselves, they might have certain personal aspirations. Maybe my relatives in USA, I want to go that zone so that I can save on my living cost. So, and again, the conviction is lower there because they're not confident whether they would get in Canada with good funding, or whether they will be able to survive and do job. Because ideally, if you go in a neutral thought, you can get into any university, you can get an admission, you can get a job also, provided you follow certain process. People who miss a couple of process, they always have certain constraints over their choices.
Yeah. That's
So
true.
when we are looking at, let's say, MS, MBA, or other courses, MIM, MSBA, finance, so ideally when people are looking to shift towards technical domain, which is good in a few years of your engineering, if you're in engineering, or even if you're doing BBA and all, so you can look towards masters, because that gives you a depth of your subjects. Masters are always realized and recognized to give you depth of that subject knowledge. MBA, on the other hand, is more for the working professionals, or someone which comes with a lot of experience. Ideally, abroad, MBA is not given to freshers. There's a very strong reason to that, because it's an over the, I would say, a course which basically touches the surface for a broader area, but never gets you into the depth of it. When you have to have a macro view of it, then MBA is good. If you want to have a micro view and a detailed understanding of it, then you basically go for your masters. Same way, MIM is ideally a preferred course designed in a structure of an MBA, but for a micro view, and that is for freshers MBA. That's how ideally we call it, as a freshers MBA. MSBA is there, MIF is there. So MBA now has a lot of competition and alternatives if you're going for masters in a particular field, because that way the course cost is very low. MBA is always going to be expensive compared to masters. Masters may cost you, let's say, 20,000, cost you straight away 50,000. So you gotta be even open. If you're having 3 to 5 years of experience, you can look towards masters or MBA both, but then you have to also look towards your finances and the ROI. MBA is going to give you higher ROI provided you have a clarity of what you're doing. Masters is going to give you substantially higher ROI, but not higher than MBA on that note. but they would give you a stable, good job to be able to work 3 to 5 years in a particular domain, and then look towards a managerial position, and then probably look at MBA.
That's clear. And how to choose a right country? So in general, most of them will go for US or UK, and if they fail to get an admission, they drop their goal of
I
doing a
understand.
masters. Yeah.
I think choosing a country or a course are nowadays it's more peer driven or a more advertisement or a trend pressure driven, which is actually a stupid way of choosing a country. Okay, if you are looking at US, yes, 25% of the entire study abroad population goes to US. Okay, but are all of them making success? No. So you have to understand what is your profile, what is your aspiration. You want to get a good job. Are you open to spend $50,000 and get a good, probably a good commercialized education though, and be in the competition, which would be a little bit ruthless. And then if you're ready to even come back if you don't get a job, are you have that risk-taking ability? Then probably US is good. Okay, if you're looking towards a core engineering course, a little bit more research oriented, a little bit more slower side of it, where the salaries may not be as high as US, but it's going to be substantially good. But you would have a little bit more comfort doing things. Okay. In that case, Europe is ideally a better choice because Europe is low cost education. So financial pressure is very low on that note. Europe is more flexible education. US, you will not have a flexibility. 1 year you did your master's, 1 year you worked, and then another year again you did your master's second year. It would not be easier in your US, but in Europe you have these kinds of flexible options. You have apprenticeship come work. You can go 3 days in college, 3 days in job. So those things are very flexible in that. However, Europe has a little bit of a disadvantage for native Europeans because they don't know their local language, and Europe is a little bit more language preferred country. If you're going to France, you might need to learn French, and that's very common because if you're planning to get into their job environment, you need to be able to talk to their people, and their people, if they prefer a European language, you need to learn that so
Yes.
that you can get a better job. So every country has their own pros and cons, requirements, or I would say constraints on that note. You have to abide by that. So US expensive, visa issues might be there. After H1B also, you might be again thrown out of the country if the visa norms are not satisfied. Europe might have a language barrier, though the visa issues are not there, but the language barrier might be there. Okay. And Canada, on the other side, it's very cold country. It's very friendly and it's highly growing country. Highly growing country will definitely have a little bit more competition than others. Okay. Scandinavian countries, not much known. The degrees, though, are very, very good in terms of the research exposure, in terms of the curriculum, in terms of their international global partnerships and student support and opportunities, but they never do their publicity compared to the European universities or US universities. So they usually have less students. They prefer to have 30 students, let's say, per batch, and they're
Okay.
okay with that. They'll give you free education. But language again might be there. Same way, even if you're considering Australia, which is more commercialized, expensive education, but then the jobs are also decent that way. Competition is there. UK now has become better. If you're looking at UK, the postgraduate work visa has improved, but again, the country's entire healthcare condition is struggling. The inside curriculum is not well updated, as what I've seen from the students thing. So there are pros and cons to each of the countries. You have to understand what pros and cons you are okay with. Okay, you want to stay longer, Canada may be good, Australia may be good, Europe may be good, now UK may be good. US is never a good option for a longer stay back because you may not know when you are going. If you want, if you're okay with the French or German language, Europe is the best option for you because that way you would have more gateways to be open. So all those pros and cons need to be well balanced, and don't shy away from learning a language because learning a language is always preferred in US also and in Europe also because it also opens up for you in the job to be able to work in a US company for German clients, let's say,
Yeah.
or work in a German company for international clients.
Makes sense. And like one thing people will get easily messed up is rejections. So when applying for foreign educations, ultimately people will face rejections, or it might be rejection in exams, it might be rejection in admission, whatever it is. So how to handle them in an effective way?
I think this is a bigger part of life than even the application process. We face rejections from the very early days of our career. Okay, might be a school, might be a peer or a parent or a close one or an opportunity. first thing that we need to learn is learn to accept rejections. And rejection is nothing but it just didn't work out the way you wanted because their ways might not be suitable for you. I take it that way. What they wanted is what I didn't have. Okay. So that's fine. Or what I have is not what they want. So that's fine. So it's just, it didn't work out.
Yeah.
It's not that you are not qualified enough, you are not good enough. Okay. You might be good enough. That's why they have considered you to review it. Okay. It's just not what they want. They are getting better than you, what you have right now. So either you have to be better, accept the competition, be better, and try next year. Try again. Okay. Have patience. I remember one of my cousin got 4 times into Oxford. It's next to impossible to get like 4 times acceptance into Oxford. But for the first 3 times, she didn't get full funding. And she
Yeah.
was hell bent. I need to get full funding. If I'm not getting full funding, I'm not going. 3 times she didn't get. Fourth time she got one of the topmost scholarship the entire UK and in the Europe. And she went. She has the patience to be able to wait for it. And at the same time, she was working on a profile, improving herself every year, showcasing that improvement. College would like that. So why would Oxford not give an admit to a person? They are giving. It's just that the funding part is limited. So she might not have cut that bar criteria for other people because others may be better than her and the others would have gotten. But this year, she got the funding and she is well studying in Oxford right now. So handling rejections in the positive spirit is very important. And when you're looking at rejections, for university rejections, it's okay. The reason people get university rejections is number one thing, the profile and the competition. This year, let's say we saw a huge volume of applications. Even the tier two universities are getting so many applications that the normally when a person would have gotten selected might get rejected because of the volume of competition. Just like it happens in IIT. To 15 lakh people go, but only 9,000 seats are there. Na? So that is where we have to understand. We have to apply early to avoid those rejections. Okay.
Okay.
Rejections is definitely not bad to have, but again, if we can avoid it, it's nothing better than that. So we need to apply early. We need to have a good application, a properly written and original, authentic application, not like a copy paste SOPs and all. So that way we would have a better conviction on our applications, and universities love that when you have a crystal clear goal in your application. That way they would be more, I would say, inclined to select you than to reject you.
Makes sense. So once after getting an admission into a specific country or specific university, what are the immediate things that one should keep in mind before going and joining into a particular college?
Okay. So once you get an admit, okay, the first thing that you need to look towards is your visas and loan and your scholarships. Okay. If you're applying to any scholarship, just look towards, are there any follow-up applications coming for scholarships? Because there might be fee waivers, there might be tuition fee waivers, there might be some kind of scholarship that the university can offer. Okay, look towards that. That's the number one thing. Find out all the scholarships on the university site, speak to the program committee, understand if there are any other scholarship that you can explore. Okay, look towards that and finalize that first.
Okay.
Secondly, you might be given a deadline to pay your fees, that by this time you need to pay your fees. Understand how you want to pay your fees. Do you have the cash right now to pay the fees? Do you want to take a loan later on or now? What is a good loan lender look like? Do you have collaterals to pay off your loans? Because the loan process might take time. It might take on an average 7 days minimum to 20, 30, 40 days also. So that is very difficult time. Sometimes people get an admit, but they did not get a loan. So the CIBIL score might be an issue, the collateral might be an issue, or the interest rate might be an issue for the students. So there are non-collateral loans versus collateral loans versus cosigner loans. All of these things needs to be understood that way. Either you prepare for all of these process upfront so that once you get it, you know the checklist, what needs to be done.
Yeah.
Or else if you don't know it, if you haven't prepared for it, then loan, then your visa, because for visa, you might need a loan sanction letter or the funding proof. If you have fixed deposit by your parents, if you have your own saved money, or if someone from your family is sponsoring you, you might need to do the paperwork for that. You need to get that funding approval receipts on that so that the visa can be allotted. And after your admit, the two things only that usually people struggle with is loan and visa, because people who doesn't have a clear visa understanding, they struggle with the visa part. The people who doesn't have a loan understanding, they struggle with the loan part. And for these things, ideally We have our platform, we have our mentors that quickly solve these problems. Either you don't know, you take help, or you try to do it in time.
Okay, makes sense. And like if people who are watching this with goals of higher education, so how to approach foreign admits?
Okay, so we have bunch of channels. We are digitally super active.
Okay.
If you connect to us on LinkedIn, to me, or to any of the team members, our Instagram is hyperactive. You can follow us on Instagram. The name is Simple Foreign Admits, as you can see here.
Yeah.
Okay, and you can eventually go to our website. There is a form. You can submit that form. You can always talk to us on Facebook page. Our numbers are pretty much given on the website. Our office address is given. Though we are 100% online company, you may not see us on the office all the time because of the nature of the kind of work that we do. People from different parts of the country, different parts of the world are mentoring you. So it's 100% digital, trusted, authentic, seamless process. So you can always find us on the website, on the social media platforms.
For sure. I will add all those links in the description. Even you can find in the description. And thanks, Nikhil. Thanks for joining with me. We got some really good insights and tips about foreign education. I think it also covers some of the myths about foreign education too. So yeah, once again, thank you for accepting my invitation. And I hope it helps everyone who are watching this.
Thank you. Thanks, Rishwan. Thanks for bringing me to the show. And I hope everyone gets a clear education path, make an informed career choice so that you could be winner and you could be the mentor for tomorrow.
Yeah, thank you. And thank you everyone for watching this. Please like and share this in your network and let others know about foreign education tips and tricks. Thank you.